We are right now right at the top of the hour, so I'll go ahead and make a quick intro. Thank you all so much for taking time to be here today. This is our April Leadership, Education, and Development series. This month, as I mentioned in the invitation, we're focusing in on neurodiversity and neuroinclusivity. We've got a really great guest speaker today, so I'm really happy to introduce all of you to Jessica Michaels. She will be our LED speaker this month, and I'll allow Jessica to properly introduce herself. But before we get into that, I just wanted to very quickly point out, as I mentioned before, we are recording. This session is going to be available on Talent LMS after we're concluded. Please feel free to come off of mute and ask questions as we go through the information. You can also pop those questions into the chat. Jessica's made time at the end of the presentation to answer questions, so we've got some Q&A time worked in there. But you can certainly use that time, or if you've got something that pops up that's pretty urgent, and just pop that in the chat or come off mute while we're talking. We're so excited to have all of you here. Please help me welcome Jessica, and I will turn it over to you for a full introduction.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate being able to join you all today. I also appreciate using Teams because that's what we use at Adobe, which is where my day job is. And I actually like Teams from an accessibility standpoint because it's easiest for people to find how to do their captions and transcripts in Teams. So I feel right at home, which is lovely. Thank you so much, Sally, for the introduction. I am Jessica Michaels, and I've got, let's see, we made the sharing work earlier. Let's see if we can do it again. Did it work? I think it worked. It looks like it worked from my end. Okay, perfect.
Yep.
So my specialty is corporate training and leadership development. I am a training facilitator, I'm a public speaker, and I'm a coach. I'm also autistic and have ADHD. And the reason that I found that out is because it wasn't, like many people are diagnosed in childhood. I was actually diagnosed in my late 30s because I was having trouble at work. That's really the catalyst that caused me to try to find out what was happening. And when I did find out I was autistic and had ADHD, I was really excited because, great, then all of my problems are soon to be at an end because there must be a cream or a pill or a solution that's going to make it so people at work don't think I'm rude anymore because I'm direct when I communicate. My team isn't going to think that I don't have empathy because I will be able to more clearly communicate to them that I care about them. I was really excited because I thought that finding out that I was autistic meant that I would be able to solve all of the ways in which I was different because I was viewing those as being bad, being problematic. And now I thought I could fix them so I could be just like everybody else. But, anything at all about neurodiversity or autism or ADHD, that is just really not how things work. So I had to figure out how, as a professional, I could move forward knowing what I know now about the way my brain works. How could I create an environment for myself where I was able to function and function successfully? And then it became, and how do I help other people do the same thing? Because unfortunately, there are not a lot of resources for adults who are autistic or have ADHD or similar conditions. Most of the resources available are focused on children, and the ones that do focus on adults are often inappropriate for people in a corporate environment. So really, I've had to kind of forge a new path here, but I am delighted now to be able to work with individuals and work with workplaces to be able to make things better for everyone, including those individuals who are just like me with autism and ADHD. So today what we are going to do is we're going to first just going to do a little bit of an intro because we're using this term neurodiversity. We want to make sure that everybody knows what we're talking about. And we're going to talk about neurodiversity in the workplace specifically, and then how do we put all that together and create a neuro-inclusive workplace? And all my ideas are free, just so you know, in this presentation. I'm happy to spend money as well. So if you would like $1,000,000 ideas, I can gladly give those to you as well. But today we'll start with the freebies. Okay. So getting started, what is neurodiversity? And I would love if anybody has any experience at all with neurodiversity, if you just want to put that in chat. If you maybe are familiar or if you have no clue and have never heard the word before, if you have a neighbor who's neurodivergent, whatever it is, if you've got any experience at all with neurodiversity, love to see that from people. And while that is happening, we'll look at kind of the most common conditions that would be considered under the neurodivergent spectrum. So we've got kind of a range. I'm neurodivergent. I have no clue, no idea. Recently informed. I have ADHD. So that's kind of what I figured is there's often a spectrum of people's experiences with what we're talking about when we talk about neurodiversity. And so the first thing to know is that neurodiversity is not a medical term. Okay? It does describe a group of people who are often identified as having what we would consider to be often a medical condition, but really neurodiversity is kind of an umbrella term for people who think differently. Okay? And we'll dive into that a little bit more in a bit. Now, often the reason people think differently is because they identify in one of these categories, and this is just a small sampling of the people we would consider to be neurodivergent. So those with autism, ADHD, dyscalculia, which is like dyslexia, but with numbers, of course, dyslexia itself, dyspraxia, if you are somebody who wakes up with mystery bruises all the time and has a problem walking and not hitting doorways, then maybe dyspraxia is something you should look into. Tourette's is something where people have verbal tics or physical tics, but there's a myriad of other things that fall under this umbrella, being gifted, being bipolar, having obsessive disorders. There's just a lot that falls under this umbrella of neurodiversity. That's what we're talking about. And there are a couple of different ways over the course of the last several years that neurodiversity and the workplace have started to come together. So first, neurodiversity in its technical definition was created by a sociologist in 1998. And what that says is, hey, all of those things that can happen in people's brains, those aren't deficits, those are normal. That's a normal part of human evolution. And then we sort of morphed into this work environment. And the idea of neurodiversity was really, hey, there are some people who have diseases like autism or ADHD, and those people can't work in corporate jobs. So we don't have to worry about it. It is very interesting sitting around a table with managers and executives at a company who say, well, if somebody were autistic, they wouldn't be able to work here when I worked there. And I am certainly, certainly somebody who contributes at a pretty high level. Then most recently, we've moved into what I call the superhero narrative, which is diversity is great, neurodiversity is amazing. You should hire neurodivergent people because they have skills nobody else does. They will fix everything, and all of your problems are solved when you hire one neurodivergent person. And all of these have their challenges, right? All of these mindsets make it difficult to apply to today's workplace. So that's the first thing we're going to do is think about how we can put this in terms that we can operationalize. Right? So right now, I'd like us to all agree that everybody that we work with has a brain. Now, if there are some individuals that you may be questioning, just don't share those with me. You can just keep those inside, but we will assume that everybody has a brain. And those brains look similar and they do similar things and their output is similar. But inside, they have an operating system. And about 80% of the world has a brain that works pretty much the same way. We'll call those our PC people. And then this other 20% of the world has an operating system that looks more like a Mac. Now, a lot of the things that they can do functionally are the same. But if you're a PC person and have ever jumped on a Mac or the other way around, you know that all of a sudden you realize the way that those two operating systems do things can be very different. If you've ever tried to like print screen on a PC instead of a Mac or something that seems simple, you understand that just because you can get ultimately to the same end doesn't mean that there aren't complications along the way. So that's sort of the neurodiversity umbrella. So neurodiversity is everybody. The neurodivergent people are our MAC people. And then what we would call neurotypical people are the PC people. Not because they're the normal ones, but because they sort of got here first and they are the greater number. So those people are considered the neurotypical. But what does that mean for us? What does that mean at work? Those are great letters and everything behind people's names. Neurodiversity typically includes any type of reason for somebody's brain to process information differently. And that means a ton of different things. That could be from how you physically sense temperature. It could be how you pay attention and how much energy that you have, how you learn language, how you use language, and how you communicate, how you interact with people, how you think through things, your mood, your emotions, the volume of your voice, how you experience pain. I mean, this is really all encompassing. So what do we take away from this? Well, it is very, very possible for you to be sitting next to somebody in the exact same situation and they could be experiencing the world in a totally different way than you are. Did I hear somebody coming on mic? Does somebody have a question? No, am I hearing things? I might be hearing things. Okay. So, um, it is not difficult for me to understand why it is hard for people to have true empathy for neurodivergent people, because it is really weird to think that I can be sitting next to somebody who could be either excelling or struggling, or they could be super uncomfortable while I'm super comfortable, and they could just be having this totally different life than I am, even though we are going through similar situations. That's a tough thing to wrap your head around. And that's why a lot of people don't know they're neurodivergent. Often people find out that their kids have ADHD or autism, and then they might find out that they themselves are autistic or have ADHD. So it's a tough thing to think about. But one of the things that is very characteristic of the majority of neurodivergent people is that while everybody has strengths and weaknesses, neurodivergent people tend to have a really big difference between their strengths and their weaknesses. So if we look at the darker gray line on this slide that kind of hovers around that 100 line, we see that for most neurotypical people, they have strengths and weaknesses that are still pretty close in terms of how well they operate. So if somebody might have a harder time with mental math, but they can probably grasp math And that is similar to the way they grasp language. And we tend to lean into that in corporate America because we say, okay, we're going to hire you for a sales position, but we also expect you to be able to edit reporting and send emails and do all of these things. So we just sort of assume that people who come into these jobs will be able to do a lot of different things about the same level of ability. Neurodivergent people tend to have really amazing strengths beyond what typical people would have. I mean, this is what makes Simone Biles amazing, and Richard Branson, and Keanu Reeves, and just so many different, Billie Eilish, many people who are in the spotlight who have great talents. It's because the way their brain works allows them to really be kind of better than average in certain things. But the trick is, we are also then, with those weaknesses, they kind of correspond, right? What goes up must come down. So I can have excellent verbal ability and I can be able to speak in public. I analyze things really well and find good shortcuts and processes of improvement. That's great. But I also can't really drive many places by myself because my sense of direction is so bad, even with GPS. I've driven to the wrong state 4 times. That's too many times to drive to the wrong state. Just let me tell you. So even though we can be really good at things, and that's often what people see, the things that we tend to try to hide around other people are those challenges because, I mean, it seems a little silly for somebody to be so good at something and not good at something else. It's how you get the absent-minded professor, right? Somebody who's a genius, but they lose the remote in the fridge. That's how that happens, right? But what's cool is just think if everybody were able to bring their best qualities to work and have that be the basis of how they do their job. So these exemplary talents in engineering, outside the box thinking, data analytics, IQ, innovation, design, all of these things are things that neurodivergent people, certain neurodivergent people, because everybody's different, but these are strengths that are very common within the neurodivergent population. Wouldn't it be amazing if all of us could do the things that we're the best at and produce work that way? And then the things that we have challenges with, we could accommodate so that everybody could just do what they do what they're good at. That'd be pretty good for business, right? And this is how I like to think of neurodiversity, is more of just this amazing collection of ability. And then we look at, well, how do we make those abilities possible? Okay. So we focus on neuroinclusion. Neuroinclusion is an environment where all employees are supported and accommodated in order to produce the best possible work. Now, that doesn't say ADHD people or autistic people or dyslexic people. Neuroinclusion means, again, everybody has that mind and we want to support everyone and create a scenario where anybody can do the best possible work because they are comfortable, they're working, towards their own strengths. Just what can we do so that everybody can do the things that they are best at? Okay? So a question that I get a lot after I talk about neurodiversity is, well, that's great, but I don't know that my workplace is neurodiverse. Like, I don't think I know anybody who is dyslexic. So this might not be something I have to worry about. Okay. Well, my answer to that is your workplace neurodiverse? Yes. Yes, it is. And how do I know that? Because you have people there. That is it. That is it. Statistically, 15 to 20% of the world is neurodivergent. Now, unfortunately, there is a good chance that the percentage of people at your work who could be neurodivergent might be smaller because there are so many barriers placed in front of people who are neurodivergent that employment statistics are very low. For college educated, so people with a college degree who are autistic, 85% of them are or underemployed, meaning maybe they're either unemployed totally or perhaps they're working either like part-time when they want to be doing something full-time, or they're in like a service job at Goodwill as opposed to working in whatever thing they studied. And that is very alarming. Um, the reason I got a cheat code is because my first job was in recruiting. That was an accident. I didn't mean to do that. I just applied for a job in the paper because that's what we did then. And I showed up and lo and behold, it was a recruiting job. They hadn't paid for a big enough ad to explain what the job was. So it was just an office job. And that's what it turned out to be. So I learned all about kind of the unstated expectations in an interview, right? What employers are looking for. And then I moved into professionalism training where I was working with people who were the first in their family to go to college. So I was teaching people all about how, you work in a professional environment and what's expected of you compared to maybe, a job at Taco Bell compared to a job at a company like Microsoft. And so throughout just these random sort of happenstances, I got to be privy to a lot of information that other neurodivergent people aren't, because our brains don't think that way. They don't process information that way. We just don't see the world the same way. It's not worse, it's just different. Okay? But it's important to know we can't tell who's neurodivergent. Okay? I cannot pick people out of a crowd that are neurodivergent. Not all neurodivergent people get diagnosed for a ton of reasons. The vast majority of people do not disclose at work. Even if they do know that they're neurodivergent, they do not share that information. And that's a good choice for a lot of people because currently there is a lack of understanding. There's still a lot of discrimination. There's still a lot of stigma. And it really can hurt you professionally to disclose at work. When I found out I was autistic, I told somebody who I work with, who I'd actually hired, and I had been facilitating with her. I trained her as a facilitator, and then she and I worked together probably 200 times. And she said, "Oh, you're autistic. Well, that's such a shame. You're not going to be able to facilitate anymore." I said, "Why would I not be able to facilitate?" And she goes, "Oh, because autistic people don't speak in front of crowds." It's like, but Chelsea, you and I were together yesterday. But that's how easy it is for people to let their bias get in the way of what they know about people. So it really is things that, it really is for the vast majority of people, there's more incentive to not share than there is to share. But again, estimated about 20%, up to 20% of the world is neurodivergent. And everybody's experience is unique. I'm autistic and ADHD, but my experience will look vastly different from anybody else, even if they have the exact same things. So we can't really depend on just going, oh, well, I would know if people are neurodivergent, because we wouldn't. So we want to kind of throw that out the door as something we need to worry about, because you're never going to be able to tell. So let's not worry about it. Now, one of the other issues that makes it really hard for people to understand the experience of people who might be neurodivergent is something called masking. And essentially, what that means is I know that I am different than my colleagues. That's just true. I communicate differently. I don't really recognize like the social structure. I'm not quite sure how Friends works. Like, not the TV show, I've got that, but like actual friendships, I don't know how to make that happen. And that does make things different in the workplace. And I know that. So what masking is kind of faking a personality that fits in with other people. And most of the time, by the time people are adults, we've done this our entire lives because we're able to tell really early in life, like, oh, I'm weird and that is bad. So I'm going to do everything I can to try to fit in. It doesn't help us. It is only beneficial to the people around us, the neurotypical people who don't like being with somebody who they might have to work a little bit harder to understand. On the right, this is the actual process. This is, I had to learn how to make eye contact because I don't like it. It hurts. But I know it's important because if I don't make eye contact, then I can be creepy. And my tendency is to look down all the time. And when I do that, people think I'm mad. So I have to make eye contact. Okay. So I researched and I found this. This tells me how long I need to make eye contact, 4 to 5 seconds at a time. Now, I don't want to do more than that because it's weird, but I don't want to do less than that because it's shifty. I don't want to stare. And if I can't look in somebody's eyes, then I want to get close, right? Looking maybe here, maybe here. So something that is less painful for me, but still makes the other person think that I'm making eye contact. If it's some really emotional conversation, then that sort of changes the rules. Same thing if it is the first time I've met somebody, that changes the rules a little bit. So this is when I am talking to somebody and I am making eye contact, this is what I'm thinking about. What I'm not thinking about is anything they're saying. I am using just about all of my focus to make that other person comfortable with my presence in the way I communicate. That's masking. Okay? And frankly, I'm doing it right now. I am not a smiler by nature, but I know that when I'm speaking in front of a group, smiling is part of what connects me to an audience. Um, for a long time, because I knew smiling was important, like professionally, so I practiced. And I really thought I had it down. I was super proud of myself. And then one day my wife goes, "Oh, you're wearing your happy frown." Like my what? There's no happy frown. And she's like, "Oh, you're frowning." Like, no, this is a smile. This is surely a smile. So she took me and put me in front of a mirror. And by golly, that was certainly a frown. That was not a smile. For 35 years, I have been positive that I've been smiling. No, I have not. I have not. So it is this challenge that exists that really is stressful for a lot of people. And you might not know that the person next to you, this is what's going through their mind. And this is where their energy is going. It takes me about, 95% of my energy is just being alive and participating and fitting in, which doesn't leave much for me to do my job. Now, can you imagine if everybody who is masking could use their full energy to just work and just be and just do their job instead of always processing this huge amount of information, trying to figure out what's happening in the world, keeping your eye out for any new situation, and just continuously doing your best to fit in all the time. Think of where we could go as a business if everybody could just do their best work. So some challenges that are typical for neurodivergent people. Often they're going to have, regardless of the letters beside their name, I've learned in my practice that any neurodivergent person I work with is going to have challenges in these areas. They're going to have a hard time recognizing unstated expectations. So the common sense, not super common. They're going to have a hard time recognizing social norms and rules and authority structures. They often have miscommunications with other people. Executive function challenges, that's where how your brain like actually does something, how you get up and go and plan a task or complete a task, maybe how you avoid procrastinating, that's all executive function. And sensory issues, right? This could be lights and sounds and socialization. So these are challenges for neurodivergent people and everyone else. I mean, even if you're not neurodivergent, some of you are bothered by the lights. Some of you are procrastinators. There are always times when people have miscommunications. And there are times when we just miss each other and have different expectations of what's happening in a situation. So these are all things that we experience together as just being people. Okay? The thing to remember is that we don't experience these things the same way. So where we trip up is going, oh, well, yeah, I know it's loud, but we'll get used to it after a while. Well, some people won't get used to it because it's not turned up to 11 for them, it's turned up to 200. Some people who have miscommunication, they just think, oh, I'll just communicate differently next time. Some people's brains are set in a totally different communication culture than you are. So we have a tendency to use this connection of, oh, we all experience the same things to go, oh, that means somebody can fix it. They can change. And that's not necessarily how it works for everybody. Okay. So again, knowing all this, how do I tell is neurodivergent? So how do I tell who is neurodivergent so I know who to treat differently? You don't. You don't. We don't treat people differently. We're not diagnosing people. What we're doing is we're creating a neuro-inclusive culture for everybody. Everybody should be able to do their best work. And the way we do that is by recognizing that regardless of the reason, everybody has preferences, right? Everybody has preferences about, they morning people or afternoon people. How do they feel about their physical environment, the lights or the sound, and if they have people around them? Do they like to do all their work together? Do they like to break it up in chunks and take naps in between? How do people like to communicate? So everybody has preferences, and the more that we can look at the way we do our work and go, okay, how can we do this in a way that everybody can operate at their best, then that is what neuroinclusion is all about. So how do we do this? One thing that's important is first we have to check our assumptions. So I've got on the screen 4 examples of assumptions that I have run into when going into businesses to help teams become more neuro-inclusive. So this employee is 30 minutes late every day. They just don't care about their job. This person keeps referring to the same situation over and over and over. He just can't get past it. This person, she's nice on the phone with all of her clients and her recruits, but when she talks to her team, she doesn't even smile. She's so rude. And this person, they have a stomach issue like every single day. They really just don't want to work. Okay. So these are assumptions, and we've all made similar assumptions about people. It's what we do. We recognize patterns. But what we need to start doing is realizing that those assumptions are not always correct, and they're wrong enough that we just really need to stop making them. Maybe that employee who's 30 minutes late every day has kids in school, and the drop-off time, the drop-off window is very limited, so they get here as soon as they can. Maybe that person who refers to the same situation over and over isn't stuck on it, but context is a part of their communication culture. This person who is friendly on the phone with clients and smiles real big, but then when she talks to her team, she has a flat face. Well, she's autistic. Right? And it is different when you are communicating in a predictable situation versus an unpredictable situation. And our friend here who has stomach issues every single day, well, they have a chronic illness and they don't want to have stomach aches every day either. They would rather only be focused on their work and feeling great. So we have to be careful about what we think about people and what we assume. So easy ways to be inclusive and to set up that neuro-inclusive culture, because it honestly is not super difficult. Okay. First is being flexible. Okay, when we can. Not every job lends itself to flexibility, but where we do have flexibility and we can honor someone's preferences, then great. if, there's schedule flexibility, sometimes people are prefer to work from home. If there's, a way that maybe a different tool people like to use, whether it's on paper or on the computer or a certain program, how they like their physical environment, any place that we can allow people the flexibility that makes their life easier for whatever reason, we want to do. Okay? And that is part of neuroinclusion. Inclusive meetings. I'm going to assume that you all have more meetings than you want on your calendar. I cannot imagine this is unique to my company. So I think we all probably have a lot of meetings, and there are ways that we can make these better for everybody. So doing things like using an agenda, um, including any pre-reads or expectations. So like if I need Sally to come prepared to offer an opinion about this topic, then she knows that she needs to come in ready to talk and isn't going to be surprised when she gets there and I say, Sally, what do you think? So letting people know what is going to be expected of them. Making sure that people have lots of different channels to share and follow up. Not everybody processes at the same speed. So sometimes people really need that time to think and come up with an answer. We tend to let the people who think more quickly, not necessarily better, just more quickly, they tend to dominate. So how do we account for those people who think in a different way, or they process more slowly? Can they follow up via Slack or via email? We just want to make sure we give everybody an opportunity to have their voice heard. One thing that we don't do, so you notice on here we say give everyone a chance to participate. What it doesn't say is call on every single person and make them talk. We, a few years ago, started to recognize, like, oh, the extroverts in the room tend to be the only ones who get to share their opinion. So we need to make sure the introverts are included too. And that's a great thought. Where we over rotated just a little bit is then by going, okay, so if Sally is an introvert, then what I am going to do, and I'm running a meeting, is I am going to say, Sally, you have not said anything yet, and we really want to hear your thoughts. Sally, could you please share right now on the spot? Go. If you are a person who's an introvert, that is almost worse in a lot of cases. So rather than singling somebody out and saying, oh, Jess, we haven't heard from you today. What do you think? We say, oh, Jess, we haven't heard from you. Is there anything you'd like to share right now? So give everybody the opportunity, but don't force people to share when they don't want to, or when they're not quite ready yet. So, but it's really, really, yes, cue Sally's panic. Absolutely. Yes. I have seen people's eyes just get this much bigger. But what's amazing is it's coming from such a good place, right? People want to be inclusive and they think they're doing the right thing, but they're doing the right thing kind of from their perspective. They think, oh, well, I don't mind talking. So if somebody called on me, I would speak. But not everybody thinks the same way. So so we just want to be mindful of the different ways people feel. Okay. We can do a lot by making sure our communication is clear. And that means being direct, not assuming that people are going to hear the words behind the words, or understand what people are thinking and feeling but not saying. No, we need to be direct with each other and direct in our communication. We need to be genuine. If you feel something or you want something from someone, say it. These coded conversations where we are saying one thing but we mean another, those aren't helpful. And it's not just neurodivergent people that have trouble in those situations. It's a lot of folks. So how can we be very clear with each other? How can we communicate in ways that give people the opportunity to use the channel they like the best? Some people are better in writing than they are verbally, or they like to have the meeting. When I get feedback from my manager, we are not going to have a good discussion about it right after she gives me that feedback. I need time to process, and then I'll send a very detailed Slack message about my thoughts afterwards, right? So how can we adapt to people's preferred communication? We want to, again, have curiosity instead of those assumptions. And we need to just make sure that everybody knows what they need to do to be successful, whether it's in a project together as colleagues or whether it's manager and employee. What do people need to do to be successful? How are they going to know? How is that going to be determined? Let's see. Yes, we talk about panic. Panic. A lot of people panic when they're called on. And, one of the things I really like actually, not just in Teams, but really any meeting software, is that if you have a hybrid meeting, even if you have a bunch of people together in a conference room and then a couple of people at home, want everybody to log in on their own computer individually. Make sure you mute everything first or you get that bad feedback. But having everybody looking at their camera and participating that way means everybody is equal in terms of their presence, and everybody can see, oh, Martha has her hand up. There's this note in the chat. So if we operate like we're virtual, even if we have a group of people who is vocal, that really does level the playing field for people and helps mitigate proximity bias, and it really kind of helps that division. So and I have gotten used to Teams, and so right now it's my favorite. We also can create team norms. Now I say team, and we have like our formal work teams, but we can do this in any team, whether it's just me and someone else teaming up for a project, or if I'm part of an interdisciplinary squad at work. We create team norms. Basically, just how do we agree? How are we going to work together? This could be, how are we going to communicate? Like when things are really urgent, how will I know? What's the best way for me to communicate with people? And then if I just want to, just socialize, how do we do that? When do we have meetings? What works for people? Morning or afternoon? Are there time zone accommodations? I am useless after 4 p.m. Everybody I work with knows this, and so they do their darndest not to have me do things after 4 p.m. And if they do need me to do something at 6, they know that I'm going to need some accommodation throughout my day at some point. So it's not a bad thing. It's just knowing that that's how I work the best. And we can work with that. It's good, I think, to talk about how we handle conflict. What are we going to do when we disagree? Because not everybody does that the same way. And that's good to talk about. Are there certain roles and responsibilities or certain tasks that somebody loves or somebody hates? How can you divide those up? What are each other's superpowers, right? We talked about strengths, and things that people are good at. If we can create a situation where the people who are amazing at certain things get to do that, and then things that they're not so good at, other people can do, that's a great way to divide kind of a work when, we don't necessarily always take the time to do that. And then how do we socialize? Like I said, I am spent after 4 o'clock. And a lot of that, frankly, is because I have chronic headaches and migraines and stomach issues from masking. That masking causes a physical toll. And so when a team member would say, oh, let's go out and get drinks, or, oh, we're going to have a picnic on Saturday, I can't do that. And it's not because I don't want to do that. It's because I physically can't, but that doesn't mean I don't care about my team. So when we talk about how do we socialize, it's, hey, maybe one day we can do a 30-minute, kind of lunch and learn or lunch and chat where we just get on the camera while we're eating, and we just have some social time together. Those are all great things to talk about and talk out with each other. Now, all of these things I've talked about, how do you keep it going? First, revisit your plans regularly. So whether it's quarterly or monthly in the beginning, say, okay, we've really been working as a group on communication, or we set these team norms. How are things going? Um, don't be afraid to customize for whatever works for your group, whether again, that's you and just one other person or you and your team. Are there different tools that you can use? Some people love Slack and that team communicates just in Slack. And sometimes people like things like Asana, for a project planning, for whatever it is. Don't be afraid to use different things to try to find what works best for you and your team. Just try all the options. If something, if you're not sure if something's going to work, well, let's do it for a quarter, and then we'll reevaluate, and then we can see. Now, I say that with a caveat that failure is an option. Failure is a word that my wife and I came up with when we are doing an activity together, and one of us just is not having a good time for whatever reason. We bail because we know that if one of us is miserable, the other one is just not miserable yet, but they will be. So we can always bail without guilt. So failure is an option. If you say, oh, we are going to have a meeting at 8:45 every day, and then we're not going to email each other in the afternoon or whatever the rules are, and then you find out in the first week that that's a terrible idea and doesn't work for anybody, you don't have to wait till the end of a quarter just because you said you were going to do something for a quarter. If it sucks, stop doing it. And then the last thing is really important. You're going to mess up. You're just going to. Part of diversity is bringing people together who are different. And there's a reason that we don't always do that. It's because being with people who are exactly like us is a lot easier, but it's not better. Right? It's not innovative. It's not creative. It doesn't give us the different connections to a customer base. I mean, there's so many reasons why diversity is better, but it does take work. We do have to navigate these miscommunications and these culture issues and these challenges, and you're going to screw it up. You are going to say something that isn't the best thing to say. You're going to misinterpret something, and that's part of it, and it's fine. You work through those moments and you learn from them and you get better. Okay? And that is how we create neuroinclusion also, is by giving each other grace. So if I'm working with my boss and they say something that really doesn't sit well with me as an autistic, I'm not going to hold it against them. Now I am going to mention, hey Eric, you said this the other day, and just so you know, this is something that isn't really cool in the autistic community, and we have that discussion and we work it out. But he's not mad at me. I'm not mad at him. We work it out, and now we both know. So expect mistakes and miscommunications, work through them, and it just makes everything better for everybody. Okay, that was a lot of talking. That was a lot of talking. So I will say right now, are there any questions that I can answer for people? I can kind of go through and look in the chat, but feel free to raise your hand, come off mute, or pop it in the chat. Are there any questions that I can answer? No topic is off limits.
I'm going to come off of mute really quick and just pop in here with a couple of the things that you mentioned. I think that we, especially at ECC, do really, really well is that accommodation without the forethought. It's just become second nature. We have those, what do you prefer, team chat or email? Do you want to view this video? I know for myself, I followed the example of others when I first started here of how do you learn best? Do you want me to go through this with you? Do you want me to watch you do it? Other folks were already doing that, and we're making those accommodations. And I just think that without putting that label of neuroinclusivity on it, we've already started that process. We've already been working that. So I really appreciate all of the work that our teammates are already putting into this.
Yeah, and it's really great when that becomes ingrained in the culture. Then at least, because there are situations where somebody needs kind of the legal definition of an accommodation, right? For
Mhm.
sure. But if you have a space where we're already in tune with each other's needs and preferences, then that makes it that much easier for a person to get that accommodation. Or it just, I mean, for me, it just means that so much energy is saved. I don't need to spend all of my energy trying to be a certain way. I can save that up, and then I can deal with the things that come up that are unexpected because I'm not just trying to fit into this box. So having it become, just a part of how the group operates, that really to me is even better than, oh, we're going to run this diversity initiative. It's just, we are going to be considerate of each other. And that is amazing. That's amazing.
Um, I didn't see any other questions coming through the chat, but if folks do have questions, maybe even after this, would you
Yeah.
mind if I share your contact details with our
No,
teammates?
that's just fine. And I can share a couple things that people normally ask right now.
Perfect.
And that is, how does somebody go about getting a diagnosis if they think they might be neurodivergent? And I always say if you spend, people who are not neurodivergent don't spend nights waking up and wondering if they are neurodivergent, right? So we have to say self-diagnosis is valid, and that's because it can be very difficult to get diagnosed. But most of these can be, you can see a psychologist in the U.S. And children are diagnosed often through the school process, but as an adult, you can sometimes see a general practitioner, or a counselor maybe can refer you to a psychologist, but um, it it can be challenging. Often there's a wait. For me, it was a 2-year wait list, and then it was like $6,000 because it wasn't covered by my insurance. So it can be tough, but there are some great online resources. Just Google like autism quiz, and you will get some really good diagnostic tools. I highly recommend social media, which is weird. Like you wouldn't expect that, but there's great communities on LinkedIn, Instagram, YouTube is a great source of information because for adults, a lot of the information comes with the community because the medical community is so more focused on kids. So we sort of band together that way. Kevin, I see you on camera. Do you have a question?
Not really a question, more of a comment. I just found it so impactful, all the information you gave us, and how it it's a respectful process for everybody. Like I just think it's I've never had an information session as meaningful. Like it connects in so many levels for so many people. I just found it fascinating, incredible, good, great job, fantastic.
Thank you. That's why we do it. Because how else are we going to figure out what's in people's heads? I mean, there's just no way for us to know without talking about it. So I really appreciate that. Thank you. I don't see any other questions. So yeah, if you would like to follow up with me, my website is, and Sally can send this out, but my website is coachjessicamichaels.com. My email is jessica@coachjessicamichaels.com. I do have videos, a lot of free content on YouTube and Instagram and LinkedIn as well. Feel free to connect with me. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. So this has been great. I got to say, I'm so impressed with the culture that you have built in this family, this company. It really is palpable. The caring that you have, and I work with employers. I mean, I work with hundreds of employers a year. This is not common. This is very, very, very special. And so it's been really an honor to spend this time with you.
Thank you so much, Jessica. I know we all very much appreciate it. And for everybody on, I will send out that information once we get this posted to Talent. I'll follow up on our chat thread here. So you'll be able to have Jessica's email address and the website, as well as a link to the Talent LMS course. So just let us know if you've got any questions or would like to dive a little bit deeper on any of these subjects. We'd love to hear that from you. Thank you, Jessica, for making time to be with us today. I really appreciate it. Everybody have a great rest of your week.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thank you
Bye-bye.
very much.
Thank you. Take care.
Take care, everybody.